Hello, my name is Ilan Majar. I'm with xLM Solutions. During this recorded session, I will review the discontinued studio tools in Enovia 3DEXPERIENCE 2019X, as well as review alternative apps that are available in the platform, talk about pros and cons, and make some comparison between them. This session is a fairly technical session, though it's only a high-level introductory session, review session. It is geared towards solution architects, beginner or advanced, as well as application engineers, anyone who has not been exposed basically to the respective admin and domain expert roles and apps in the platform. As far as the agenda, the topics I will be going over, the discontinued tools in Enovia or 3DEXPERIENCE 2019X, the data model customization app, for those of you who are not familiar with it, the respective licenses TXO, collaborative space control functionality, MQL, and a little bit about its evolution, and then comparison between the new web-based app and the studio tools. A quick disclaimer, this recording is based on informal observation that we've made at xLM Solution, and it's neither vetted nor reflects any official inputs from Dassault Systems. One more important thing to mention is that this is not a deep dive training session by any means. It's more of an introductory session. If you need additional material, there's good documentation in the support area in 3ds.com. If you have access to the DS Companion, there's good documentation and training sessions there as well. And you can always contact us at xlmsolutions.com, info@xlmsolutions.com for further assistance. Okay, so before we talk about the new apps that are available with the platform, let's talk about what's not available anymore. So as I'm sure a lot of you have heard, starting with 2019X, 3DEXPERIENCE 2019X, Enovia has discontinued the usage of and deployment of the studio tools. Those are the traditional administrator tools to either define, modify, or query a data model, or query the data model, or query for data. And again, they've been very useful when defining the data model, customization, configuration, and so on. Those are not available anymore with the exclusion of MQL. MQL is still available, and you can pretty much do what you used to do in the past. It also evolved to deal with some new functionality. We'll talk about this a little bit towards the end of the presentation. But with MQL, it can be a tedious work to do everything. There's no easy UI and access to configuration, and so it's a lot more tedious to script things through MQL. Okay, why is this important? If you are a customer coming or upgrading from an earlier version of Enovia or 3DEXPERIENCE, and you're used to work with business and metrics, it's going to be a transformation. You need to be prepared for upgrades, or if you want to deploy one environment to another environment, let's say production to test and so on, make changes and so on. Either be prepared to work with MQL, have tools like Spinner, or as we're going to review during the next few minutes, get up to speed with the new available functionality, the new direction Dassault is taking with the web apps, the administrative web apps. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about TXO, and then I'll show a very brief demo. Again, this is not a deep dive demo. The intent here is more about the comparison between what's the business tool and the data model customization app. So, and if you hear me refer to the tool as data model customization app or TXO, it's pretty much the same thing. TXO is just a license, the license diagram. So the app allows administrator and domain experts to extend the out-of-the-box data model types and attributes. You can basically, just as you used to do in the business tool, can extend or derive types and attributes. We'll talk about some of the differences later on. In the case of TXO, it's primarily a derived type of packages that are already available. Basically, a data model is already provided by DS. There's no easy way to create a completely new type within the data model customization. You can only extend existing types that are provided with the Dassault built-in packages. You can extend attributes of types. You can also create what Dassault refers to as customer extensions. Those are kind of type attribution extensions that that can be either automatically added to an object or have a user configured so that a user can add them as needed to an object at runtime. And this is normally defined based on some business rule, for example, specific industry attribution, part types, and so on. Okay. Advantage of using the TXO, first of all, it's easier maintenance and administration. There's a easy graphical UI. It's available from the platform. It's not a client server type of tool like the studio tools were. Doesn't require additional installation in that, from that sense. There's easy deployment. We'll talk about this the last point in the bulletin. It supports basically the packaging, the deployment of the data model changes from one environment to the other. It's upgradable, so any changes you make here will be upgraded and supported through the upgrade. It supports the UPS data model. For those of you who are not familiar with the UPS, it's the Unified Product Structure, which is the direction Dassault is taking with the 3D Experience platform. Applies to any of the 3D Experience, CATIA, Delmia, any of the native apps, as well as the Power BI ones. And basically everything is kind of in a single unified product structure, all the data. But it also allows you to extend the older data model. So if you want to extend the old EBOM part, the EC part policy, or any of the Designer Central data model types, you could do it, though there is some best practices in doing so. Okay, there's some limitation in doing so. For example, if you use a SolidWorks integration, and so on. And I'll talk about this a little bit after in the next few slides. There's also support for the business logic, so defining business rule. This mainly refers to EKL. Those of you who are not familiar with EKL, it's a scripting language typically used traditionally for knowledge in management in native apps, but can also do and handle events on the PLM side, though it's not as rich or really comparable, in my view, to any of the traditional triggers, Java-based application in Novia, but it lets you do a lot. And Dassault is going more and more into the direction of using the UPS data model with EKL business rules to drive certain events. So again, you can define those events, primarily EKL language, but also I think support some XML definitions and whatnot as business rules. One important comment to mention is that the attributes, the extended attributes, are created as an interface attribute. So it's the type interface dot attribute name, unlike an attribute that you traditionally use to add to a type. Attributes are now added through interface. Interface existed for a long time in Novia, and right now the way the tool in the UPS extends the data model is using interface attributes. So if you look in the back end in MQ, you'll see the type interface dot attribute rather than just the attribute name. And as I mentioned earlier, it supports deployment packages, so you can once you're done with your change, you can deploy to the environment and also package it and export and import into other environments when you go from production to test to dev, and so on. Allows you also to define unique keys. Those unique keys do not replace the TNR, the type name and revision in the Novia. They're additional, but you can extend the uniqueness based on any extended attributes that you add through the data model customization app. So let's take a quick look at the data model customization app now. To access the app, if you go to the northern quadrant, and you wouldn't require the TXO license, that's the Trigram TXO. Under the, I saved it here under my favorites, but under the customization administrator role, you have the data model customization here. I'm just going to click on it. Okay, it launches the app. If I click on the specialized data model, it brings me to this screen. I can then create basically a new specialized package. And normally it will ask you, it's mandatory to select a parent package. I'm just going to call it demo here. And any Dassault available out of the box package will be available for you for extension. And it brings up the list of available packages. This is documented in the 3ds.com support site. It's not trivial to figure out what package you need, although in some cases the name is kind of intuitive. So for example, in my case, if I want to extend any of the change management, change action, change order, attribution, and whatnot, I'll select this package. In my case, let's assume I want to add a few attributes to the change action. I'll click submit. Notice that it populates the parent package. I have to assign a prefix. This will be saved as a prefix to any type you add in the system or attribute, including the registration name properties. One good thing about TXO, it handles the indexation as well as registration. You don't have to do that separately through MQL or the UI as you used to do in the past. Click Done to create this package. And now I have a new package here ready to be worked on, and later on when it's ready we can deploy it to this environment. And now if I select my package and just click on it, it will take me into the data model definition. And you can see these are the inherited out of the box packages that I can basically extend attribution for, or types in this case. So in this case, and I'm not sure it's the best example, if I wanted to extend the change action and create derived types of that type, I would simply click the new. And you can see the parent type is identified as a change action. I can call my subtype, provide a name. CA. Can assign icons to comments. Let's ignore that for now. Click OK. And notice that now the new type subtype is configured. It's not yet deployed, still because we're not ready yet to apply this into the system. Okay, so it's not available for users. It's still in admin work mode, working process. Okay, so I jump back here to the list of specialized packages, and once I have this one selected, I can go ahead and basically deploy the new package. If you hover over the thing, it will show you and now it says that it's deployed. Once the package is deployed, and again, it's not a detailed training. You can dive into it. This is my demo package. These are the out-of-the-box available types. If I expand the change action, you can see the type I added. I can select it and add additional attribution. So if I want to add my own attributes, I can click on Add. Will allow me to define an attribute, assign it to a 6W tag predicate, define the type. If there's any preferred unit, multi-valuated, and if so, you can allow adding the authorized value. So whatever you used to have as a range, you can basically type in the value 1, and then keep, this is going to be your range. One thing to mention here, and I'll show you that in a minute, is if you try to, for example, add a space, this is the internal names, see what happens, and then keep going. You'll get a warning that basically spaces and certain characters are not supported, which again, in Enovia, the old days, in QL matrix, you could go to a range and set spaces. The approach here is that the internal values added through the TXO, so the data model customization app, are stored without any special character spaces and so on. And then we're going to use the NLS translation, as you can see here, the manage NLS, to translate values later on. But as you can see, you can set different values, length, user access, whether it's read-only, read-write, should it be reset or not on revise, duplication, cloning, and so on. Somewhat similar to not the full functionality yet in business, but somewhat comparable. The nice thing about this is that the indexation, you have an option to specify indexation here or not, and then along with the deployment, it will add it to the indexation. There's some best practices not to be covered in this training as far as what to do with running with redeploying the rebuilds of the index afterwards. But that's again not for the session, and whether it should be XPDM exportable. One more thing is that once you add all the attributes in the new data model with all the widgets or the web apps, this piece will handle the UI, the forms, or the property pages automatically. Unlike business, you don't have control or the ability to define the order of the fields and so on. But once you add a field, it is automatically added to the property page. So you can see how you can add, I'm going to cancel this right now, attribute to the derived type. You will not be able to change an out-of-the-box type here because it's basically a DS type. You see in the comments it says DA type. However, there's other apps, I'll show you that, not available in the system. We'll see that next, not part of the data model customization app, that will allow you to extend some of those types as well. And if you do, it will reflect here as well. Okay. There's other areas. Again, these are types, meaning these are attributes that extend this type permanently. We talked about customer-specific extension, which is the ability to extend certain type based on some big business logic automatically or based on user definition. That's part of this tab here, extension. You can manage unique keys. So once you extend attribution of type, you can add use those attributes to build a deployment unique keys. Again, this is not a detailed training. I just want to give you a sense of what the tool allows you to do. Create a package, deploy it, extend type attributes, create extensions, unique keys. Once deployed, you can deprecate a package, though if you have existing data, it won't allow you to remove it. So this is pretty much, in essence, what I wanted to show as far as the TXO goes. again, if I go back to my packages, I can use this button to import or deploy packages. So when moving from one environment to the other, we can simply export and import the packages. NLS, so if I pick my demo right now, I don't have any specialized attributes, but if I had added any attributes, I can define the matching NLS values. For example, if I have my own values here, anything that has built-in custom attributes. I can then go and assign if I edit this package, I can go and assign, for example, this is a different package I've created. I can go and assign different NLS values. Okay, this includes attribute types as well as type names. Okay, and this is the right approach, going back to the range values to handle ranges. Okay, meaning the internal value will have no special spaces or special characters, and then the NLS will define the actual values the users should see. Okay, and there's more into this tool. Okay, again, this is not a deep dive training by any means. So let's go back to the presentation real quick. So let's talk a little bit about just what's not in TXO. This is important, especially if you're a savvy business and metric user. Okay, and now you need to transition to TXO. So one thing you cannot do, and on the left I show what you used to be able to do in the business part of the studio tools. You cannot create your own generic, let's say, root type or custom type. You can only extend and derive system types. You can create custom extensions, but again, the types are for the most part derived from out-of-the-box types, whether it's UPS type or the traditional, EBOM, Design Engineering Central driven type from back in the days. Okay, so if you just want to create your own custom type, root type that is not derived from an out-of-the-box type, you cannot do that. Whereas in business, you were able to do that. You can still do it through MQL. However, it would be considered a customized type. It won't be available to most of the web apps, the widgets, and there may be some lack of functionality. So would consider it a custom type, and you're really on your own as far as upgrades and maintenance and so on. Okay. However, in business, you could do it through the tools, using the business UI. You cannot change policies, which is something you could have done through business. Again, this is part of Dassault's effort to lock the system and force customers in a good way to adhere more to the out-of-the-box. So it makes the maintenance of the system easier. If you have to assign an attribute to more than one type, it's a little bit tricky. In business, you could create a type and then go and assign this type to multiple. You can create an attribute and then you can go and assign it to multiple types. Okay, you can also do that in MQL. You can do it in MQL using MQL today. Okay, you cannot do the same using the TXO, the data model customization app. So if you want to extend your UPS data model, make sure that you add an attribute higher in the level, or maybe on the VPM reference. This way it will be inherited to more subtypes. Okay. If you're using the traditional data models like the EBOM, let's say the EC part policy, or any of the SolidWorks or older CATIA V5, again, Design Essential types, there you may need to create the same attributes multiple times because they do not, unlike the UPS, they do not share parent component parent types in most cases. Well, ones that can be extended maybe at least through TXO. And so you may end up creating multiple attributes. It's going to be seamless to the user because it's going to be indexed and the XLE search will find it. It's just that it's not as maybe normalized from a database standpoint. Okay. There's no UI configuration. So as you can see on the left, and those of you who have been using business, you had the web form. You can go in and say attributes, bind attributes, deal with tables and grids. And there was a UI that allowed you to go in and do these things. So web form, again, web forms, command, channels, all that stuff. You had a UI interface that can easily allow you to define types, relationships, web forms, grids, and so on. This is not available in TXO, good or bad. The good thing is that any attribute you add is automatically and dynamically loaded using this application, whether you're using UPS apps and web apps widgets, or if it's the old traditional Java web forms and stuff, it will dynamically load the attributes to those property pages or web forms. However, you cannot control the order and things of that sort. There's a way to work around it using MQL. If it's the old Java apps, you can use MQL to build the forms. That being said, it's a very tedious process. Either MQL or Spinner, though Spinner would be a expensive license to do that. If you're using any of the widgets or the web app, UPS-based applications, basically, obviously you have no control on the property pages. It's only dynamically loaded. But anything that is added through the TXO will be dynamically added to the property page. Okay, and this is just one example of a script in case you want to control a workaround. You want to control, applies mainly to the old, Java, the web forms, the traditional apps, not the widgets and the web apps. This is just an example of a script that would modify a web form, but you can see it's very tedious. I'm also using here the real attribute names, and in reality, when using the TXO, you'll probably see the interface.attribute name, but it's just a minor detail. Point being, it's going to be very tedious if you want to do any UI changes, and it will only apply to the traditional apps, the Java-based app, not to the widgets or web apps. The next thing I want to do is go over some other available application in 3DEXPERIENCE that can help you configure the system. However, before I do that, I want to real quick jump back to the TXO, the data model customization app, and show you a couple of things I forgot to mention. Here we are. First is the business rules that I mentioned earlier. This is the ability to mainly add business logic, primarily around EKL, though some, using business resources, those are saved as business resources object in the system and can be hooked on different events. This is geared mainly towards native app behavior, but also supports, for example, if you use the Delmia MFN for manufacturing item management and all that stuff, hook events in the system, which is completely different discussion and topic, but it's a different data model or approach to manage events, unlike triggers and what most Innovia implementers are used to. Triggers are still available, heavily used out of the box, and can be extended or customized, but through TXO you can also add business logic, assigning basically knowledge resources and primarily using EKL to drive different validation and rules, business rules in native apps and apps in 3DEXPERIENCE. Okay, and also for the NLS, you can always download the NLS and basically deploy it on either native apps or move it from one environment to another. Again, this is available through some of the commands. Okay, so now let's go back and see some other tools and other apps that are available for customizing the data model in 3DEXPERIENCE 2019X. They actually existed, all these tools, including the TXOs, since earlier versions, but really from 2017X and then into 18X, there have been more solidified, more functionality was added, and really this is the direction the SO is pushing towards. So if I go back to my, again, Northern Quadrant, and I'm logged in as an admin, and by the way, the TXO license can be assigned to a leader, which is what is considered as a domain expert, not just as for admin. But if I added this app called Outage Space Control here to my favorites. This is available under the platform manager role. And if I click on it, open it up. So this app allows the administrator to, again, configure certain things and rules in the system. I'm not going to go over everything here. This is just, again, just to let you know that it exists, and you can explore and see if any of the settings or business rules here apply to your customers or the changes that you need to make. So one thing is obviously the attribute extension. You can see both the new UPS types like physical product, VPN reference, or the more traditional types as well. If we scroll down here, you can see other types like the traditional part and whatnot. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to select not the physical part of the UPS data model, just the traditional part, for example. If I click on it, it will bring the ability to select the part and add additional attribute. And if I click here, it will pretty much reflect the exact same or similar look and feel to what we saw in TXO. So again, the ability to define whether an attribute should be indexed or not, read-only, mandatory, default values, ranges, and so on, and define a 6W predicate. It will also show up, by the way, in TXO if you add it through here. Okay, so again, this is the ability to add attributes to different types. Okay, and this does not require additional licensing from what I know. Another area in this app that I jumped to is the content naming rules. This is where you can define the what used to be, the naming convention. Again, counters are not used like they used to be in the past. Object and number generators. This is really packaged for you. If you want to use the out of the box, data model and ensure it's upgradable, etc. So with the 3DEXPERIENCE, this is the area where you can define your the naming convention. Okay, so you select the type, and then you can set the prefix, suffix. I'm sure you're familiar with the new 3DEXPERIENCE naming convention. So that's another area where you can define. The admin can set or configure the naming convention. The next area is the revision naming, and it tells you the one with the green checkbox that's deployed and versus something that's not yet configured. It allows you to select per document type. If I scroll here to the left a little bit, per document type, what revision combinations are available for that type. Okay. This is not to say that this is out of the box revision schemes. If you want to go beyond that, it would be considered customized. You can still use MQL to do your own thing, and though that would not be considered out of the box, and you would have to handle it through upgrades, customization, and whatnot. Again, that was the revision naming rules. The next area in this or panel, and again, I'm going very briefly, is access control. There's a lot to it, and from what I found is that you really need to go through some trial and error. Some things, behave differently if you select multiple options at the same time versus single option. So my best recommendation is really go through trial and error with different combinations of settings. However, in most cases, the description is fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. In this case, for example, do you want to allow a leader to modify frozen content? Yes or no? Obviously, this is one option. And then a bunch of other rules. as far as reverse definition of content creation, blah, 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 go through those and see there's some additional rules on top of that apply to the whole security context and collaborative spaces and lifecycle operation. I advise you to go over this. This could be very useful, and we often modify it. I'm not saying it's recommended, but for special cases, the out of the box may not work for a customer scenario. There may be an easy solution here. So before you jump into customization triggers and whatnot, you may have an out of the box configuration option. The next panel is the maturity graph. Again, could be very useful. If I click on this guy and I pick, let's say, the engineering definition, which is the VPM, the UPS, the physical product, and the whole UPS default policy, you can drive certain rules or change out of the box rules. Though this again requires some trial and error. If you need help with these type of things, please let us know. The system will not let you do certain things, so you can, for example, rename. You won't change the internal name, but you can rename the state name, or at least what the user sees, as well as adding some rules. So if I jump back to the slides real quick. So this is an example. You see those two rules at the bottom. I added those, and please feel free to contact us at info@xlm.xlmsolutions.com if you have any questions. But we added a couple rules here that are not available, although this is considered. You can do it through this app, and basically by adding these two rules, we enable the enforcement of release under change control. Okay. So again, you can add different rules to change out of the box behavior. However, it is supported and configurable options in the system. Then following the access control and the maturity graph, there's a few app specific or module specific behaviors. So for example, requirements configurations, engineering part automation, retention policy for iteration, so some management of iteration policies. And again, this is pretty much what's out of the box. I'm not going to go dive into these ones, but there's again, automation around EC parts. Do you want to float the EBOM on a new release or not? So this is app or module specific, specific BPS areas where you may have some additional behavior out of the box that before jumping into configuration. In the past, some of it used to be done in the GCO, in GCOs and config files or through customization. There's some built-in functionality that could be enabled or disabled when working, in this case, with EBOM. But there's also specific area for requirements configuration, variant management, retention policy for iteration, how many in days. And to be honest, I haven't tried all of those. Okay, engineering workspaces. Okay, who can create a workspace and so on. Then it goes into the change management. And again, in this case, you have change order specific set of rules that you can play with. And again, the naming and the description is fairly self-explanatory. This guy here, enable change control and check on revise, is something that we often, if I go back to presentation, we more than once ended up changing. I just jumped back to the slide to show you this is something that sometimes you may want to consider in case you want to enable or disable a change control on revise, for example. I'll go back to the app. And lastly, the configuration deployment allows you to export, import configuration. restart the indexation if you make any changes, adding attributes and whatnot, reload cache, download files that needs to be deployed, the CATIA NIs, native apps, and whether to apply extensions to existing objects. If you add the attribute, let's say after there's some data in the system already, should it apply automatically to existing data or not? Things of that sort. So again, this is all available through the Collaborative Spaces Control Center, which is available the admins as part of the platform manager or platform administrator role. Platform manager, this guy here. And now jumping back to slides real quick, talk about MQL. So MQL really hasn't changed much. Sorry. It is available in its traditional way as a thick client app, as a command Windows, as a command dialog app, as well as through the web, though only for admin and certain modes, part of the collaboration approvals app. It hasn't changed much. It's still available. So any of the limitations I mentioned previously with comparing business to TXO, with creating your own types, attributes, and so on, can still be mitigated by using MQL and custom data models, though you're kind of, the source says you're kind of at your own risk. So that would be considered at that point customized data model, and you would have to make sure that you go through the proper steps during upgrades and whatnot to properly maintain the system and ensure that it's upgradable. Like anything else, MQL keeps evolving. This is not new, but for example, now so is making, for example, for the C, this is an example of the data model for a change action in the object. So up until, I believe, 2017X, maybe 18X, I don't recall off the top of my head, links between, let's say, the CA, CO, and the what's called today proposed change. In the past, it used to be was renamed recently. The link was reintroduced as a path, a more complex structure, more scalable but complex structure. And then again, MQL is now using the paths as well, or adopted to use that. So this is just one example out of many. And the point to make here is that obviously MQL evolves. This is not just on the data side, the infrastructure, on many levels. Okay, and again, documentation is available on 3ds.com. I'm not sure it's available in PDFs as it used to be for the newer version, but it's well documented in the support area in 3ds.com on the SOS website. With that, this concludes the session. A very informal session. I just wanted to share my thoughts, observations with anyone who's interested. Feel free to contact us at xLM or me directly with any questions, comments, etc. Thank you.